G'day, Keithy here. Thanks for joining me again. Today we're working on the Range Rover again, as you can see here. We've got a special day today. We've got A is for Alternator, a bit of Sesame Street action for you. So this is what we're going to replace here today. And why am I replacing it? Well, I'll get to that in a second.
Well, we couldn't go without checking this out.
Right, tearing up tyres now. G'day, Keithy here. G'day, Keithy here. G'day. Alright, so probably one of the best things about changing parts on your car is doing the unboxing. So I'm going to do that now. Why am I going to do it now? Because obviously we're going to make sure we're putting the same alternator back into this thing so we don't have the wrong one going in and take all that time pulling the old one out just to find that it's the wrong part. So let's open it up and see, make sure it's alright. Alright, so what I can see here, it's got the same pulley on the front. 150 amp, which is the same as the alternator that's already in there. It doesn't have any of the Land Rover part numbers on it, but what I'm interested in here is the connectors that go onto the back. So what I can do now is I can compare these connectors with what I've got in the car already, and remember there's one up here as well, just to make sure that I'm putting the right one back on so I don't have to go through all that muck around in order to get the right alternator on this thing. Alright, so a quick search shows that the alternator is the same as the one that's already in here. Now all I've got to do is go through here and find out what I've got to do to get rid of the old one. Alright, so before I even start this, you're probably asking why are you changing your alternator out? Usually it's because something's gone wrong. Well, in this case it hasn't. But as you're probably aware if you watch my videos, I've had this car for over 6 years now, coming on to 7 years, and that alternator was the one that was on it when I purchased the car. So that's pretty good in 7 years. Now I haven't got problems charging at all, but you know what, the time is coming soon. The alternators don't last forever, the brushes wear out and things happen to them. Given you're driving, if you guys have watched my videos, you would have seen some of the stuff that this actually does. Is that plane times it perfectly. Yeah, it's just a bit of a preventative maintenance thing. I know that this alternator is probably getting to that stage where it's going to need to get changed out soon. So rather than wait for something to happen on the trip, I'd rather get to it beforehand, and that way I can get some bits and pieces and probably put new brushes and whatnot into that alternator and have it as a spare. Now what we're going to do, before I even worry about taking that out, I want to just test this alternator. Now I'm not going to go and use anything scientific. I've got here my little multimeter and the keys to the car. So I'm just going to turn the car on and know that the auxiliary battery in the back is actually fully charged right now, so it's not going to take any power from this alternator to add charge to that auxiliary battery. So I'm just going to put the terminals on the positive and negative and see what kind of voltage we've got sitting there idling, because there's nothing that it needs to charge. So we'll do that now. I'll start the car up, put the multimeter on there and see what kind of voltage at idle we're sitting at. So that's not too bad right there. You saw that we had about 13.8 volts at idle. Air conditioning's running, park lights are on because this thing normally has the headlights automatically come on when you start it on, so I've just put the park lights on to reduce some of the load on that. And the radio was still running in there as well, so 13.8, pretty good. 7+ year old battery, I don't know how old it actually is. But yeah, oh no, it's at least 7 years old, the alternator. So let's chuck the new one in and see what happens, see what the difference is. Alright, so you can see what I've got to do here to get this alternator out. Obviously this coolant hose here is going to need to go. I'll probably take the shroud off the fan as well, just in case. I'm also going to have to remove the belt off the alternator pulley, and then I can continue on with this job. So I also like to take the coolant cap off, the reservoir cap, if I'm going to be doing anything with the coolant hoses. That way it just releases the pressure from the system. So I'll go ahead now, I'll get some tools together and we'll remove all this other stuff. always take the battery off. What I'm going to do real quick is with my multimeter, I'm going to see if there's any current still going through this into here. We don't want any links. So we're good. Alright, so what you may or may not see is I haven't actually taken any of the terminals off the back of the alternator yet because I couldn't get a good view, even though I did take a photo in behind here beforehand. If you don't know what goes where, the easiest way to do it is to try and leave your wiring on if you can. Obviously I've disconnected the battery here so there's nothing live back here. But that way when I pull this up I can not only take a photo, I can have a memory of exactly what goes where on this alternator. And that way when I put the new one in I've got everything exactly where it needs to go. Now I can't pull that too much further because that one's quite tight. You can see this one goes down to the bottom there. What I'll do now is I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to take a photo of all of this and get ready to remove the wiring from the alternator. And there we have one alternator out. Alright, so I got the old alternator out. I got the new one side by side with the old one. You might come across this because these days a lot of these alternators are multi-purpose. So this new one might fit a variety of different vehicles. The new one's actually got 4 terminals on it, whereas the old one only has 2. That's 2, not that. So let me explain. I'll turn you around and show you what this is all about. Alright, so pretty clear to see here. There's only 2 outlets on this alternator. 2 points to bolt her on. That's all that came off when I disconnected this alternator off my Range Rover. But you go over to the new one and you can see here we've got 1, 2, 3 and a 4th one which has got like a plug on it. Now what do they all mean? Okay, so this D+1 here, so this is a small wire that will have come off, which it did. That one right there, off the original alternator. You got B2 and you got B1 here. And what are they for? Well, as it turns out, they're actually the same. So this alternator is probably multi-purpose. It might fit a variety of different vehicles, but these are linked together. So some vehicles might have a secondary output from the B module. It just gives you another place to be able to connect to the alternator. So it may well be handy for dual battery systems and things like that if you were really keen and wanted to tap directly to the alternator for a dual battery system. But you might be wondering what this W is down here. This is actually a speed signal of the alternator. So you can plug a tachometer or tacho, whatever you want to call it, into that and use it to get the engine revs of the car. So obviously some manufacturers who use this same alternator in their vehicle may have a tacho signal come from the alternator there. It's very interesting, something different, and it might confuse a few people, but just so you know, the B1 and the B2 are fed from the exact same place, so it doesn't matter which one you put on, they're both going to work. And in my case, I think it's going to be easier for me to get my connection onto this B2 than it is going to be on the B1, because as you see, I'm going to have to take the nut off that and muck around with there and obviously make the wire come up from a different point. So when I hook my new alternator up, I'm going to make sure that I use this B2 here, and obviously the D plus is a positive if you didn't know what the plus meant. So let's get this one back on there, the new one, and we'll see what happens. see there, it went in pretty good. I've just got to line this up now and put the bolts through, which I'll do. And then we can put the coolant stuff back on, put the fan back on, and give it a little test run. That's bolted in. Before I go any further, I'm going to make sure that the wires on the back that I've just done up aren't catching on anything and they're not pulled a weird way, because the last thing I'd want to do is damage one of these wires in doing this alternator change. Alright, so the last thing I've got to do now is put the negative terminal back on, and I'll just check everything, make sure that it's all attached and looks good. I may have to top the coolant level up a little bit because I took this top hose off here, so I lost a little bit, but I'll double check that anyway. Put the earth on and then we'll start up, see how we go. So there you have it. So basically what we've determined is there was nothing wrong with the old alternator. It was still pumping out quite a good voltage there. It was doing its job very nicely, but I'm glad I changed it because it's probably at the very end of its life. I can rebuild that one now with some new brushes and whatnot, and that'll be good to go again in time when this one here needs to come out and get swapped out. Alright, so it's a pretty windy afternoon. Apologies about the noise there from that. We'll try and keep it short and sweet for you. A bit of extra bonus footage on top of the old alternator job. So as you can see, it's all done, it's all wrapped up now. Why did I do it, you might ask? I might have touched on it at the start of the video, but basically this vehicle, this Range Rover, needs to be ready to go at a moment's notice. It's a business vehicle, it's a family vehicle that does things like school runs, etc, etc. I've obviously got my ute. If you've seen my ute videos, I've got the ute that I can drive around if I want to, but needing the extra seats obviously when doing the school run with two kids. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, this thing is just more practical, and obviously it's set up to go camping, bush, four-wheel driving, you name it. On top of all the school runs and the work duties, I need to make sure that this thing is gonna keep me going on the tracks. When I'm out in the middle of nowhere with no phone reception and most likely no spare parts to be able to do that kind of job, I know that now I've got at least 5 years before I need to worry about that again, and that's 5 years that I can rebuild that old alternator and have it ready to go. So in 5 years time you might be seeing the same video, me doing the same job again, change the alternator out. I know there's some other parts on here that'll get to the end of their service life very soon as well, which we'll look at down the track. But for now, at least I know that I'm going to be able to start the car when I need to start the car, I'm going to be able to charge the battery at the back. So when I go camping, when I go for my business, I'm going to be ready to go at moment's notice. So have you got any stories about doing maintenance work on your car as well? Do you get right into the preparation work and preventative maintenance and that kind of stuff yourself? Let me know. Chuck a comment down there, have a yarn, or you can go over to Chilling with Keithy on Facebook or the Instagram as well. Now I've been pretty quiet on there. I must apologise, I have been away quite a lot, so I haven't had the chance to get on the social media, but I will get right back into that very soon. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much. Don't forget to share, subscribe, like, that stuff down there. And I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for sticking around.